Hello and welcome to another coding walkthrough. This time we're going to carry on from where we left off with the last one, where we had walked through our code that we hadn't seen for a while and worked out where it was that we needed to make changes. Now let's briefly recap what those changes are. So the program is one of mine called Folder Tree. It's a tool for analysing differences between files and folders and doing various things in an automated way. And I have a wish to add a new feature to this. So here is a screenshot of Folder Tree. The particular part we're looking at is the part called Congruent Tree, which is where it does the comparisons. And we're only looking at changing the section that does a comparison of two paths. On the screen here at the moment is what the interface has been looking like, where you could choose a path A and a path B, have a variety of settings for how well it should do the comparison, and then run the process. And what we wanted to do is add a new ability that when it goes and does those comparisons, when it finds differences, we want it to generate a copy script. So in the last video we covered the fact that I had added some new controls into the program. So that look down at the bottom of the form here. So let's jump back to the code and just very quickly see what that looked like. So here is the code, and if we execute this at the moment, it looks like this. Here is the Congruent Tree tab, and down in the bottom section here we've got some new features that we've added. Today we're going to deal with just one of them, and that's the checkbox here to say generate a copy script. At the moment these controls have been added, but the switch for actually doing a generation of a copy script has been left turned off. So we'll want to turn that on and then trace through the code to work out where the fact that that is now turned on needs to be passed in, so that then some more code can be written to actually do the change. So today's coding run is kind of a housekeeping process to follow through on that action and at least go to the spot where we looked at last time. We'll need to then actually add new code. So let's just stop this like that. Here is the place in the module that handles the graphic user interface, the GUI, and this is the code where it was making the new checkbox. In fact, the new checkbox is this one, T02, because it's on the second tab, which is Congruent Tree, and it's a checkbox. And I've called this Gen Copy Script because it's for generating a copy script. That's the purpose of it. As you can see here, we've defined the checkbox. We've given a label for the display of it, generate a copy script, and we have set which variable is going to be modified by the checkbox. It's T02 check variable Gen Copy Script. So basically, check variable in the middle of the name there instead of checkbox. And there it is there that's being defined. So that's certainly the value that we will need to pick up and do something with when we go and run the process button. It is being set to, the check mark is switched on, it's being set to 1, and actually there is where it gets set to being disabled. So we'll come back, and as the last step in our change today, we'll go and change that to enabled. But for the moment we'll leave it disabled so that nothing will actually be affected by what we change today. So to some extent what we want to do here is we want to add the use of this variable to the things that get passed down into the inner workings of the program. So what may help here actually is if we go back up a script a bit, because these new controls are added in a piece down the bottom. But if I scroll up a bit to where I was actually setting the other ones, we do have to go up a little bit here. Action buttons, what are we looking at? Does help to remember quite what we're doing. Okay, so there are other controls that were being used to affect how the run would happen. This one's a good example, which is to say, in comparing the two paths, should it stop as soon as it found things were not the same? So that's a stop not congruent setting, and then in particular that's the check variable setting for that. So we can now go searching for this and find where we then use this elsewhere in the code. That's where it gets referred to. Went to the bottom. Now this is actually looped around, gone to the top, and then come back searching down. And in fact here is where we are picking up the value of that checkbox and putting it into a variable, and then here is where we are passing the state of that variable into the thing that will actually run a process. So we covered this in the previous video and looked at where this was. So we know that actually what we want to do is add a new variable into here, really. So now I kind of know what I want to do. Let's do Control G to search again, to jump back down to where that one was. So at the moment my search is jumping around to where this particular check variable is being either made or set or then read. But if I scroll back down to where we were before, to where our gen CopyScript one was, so this is the new value that I want to pick up. So I'm going to put that in the clipboard. Control C, put that in the clipboard. And actually I want to jump back now to that bit of code that we were looking at. So I'm going to do Control Home to go back to the top. This is the way the editor works here. Control G to repeat the search. This is where we were a second ago. But actually means that now what I want to do is put in a new line here where I will go and pick up that one instead. So instead of picking up the not congruent, I want to pick up the value of the CopyScript one. And so pasting that in, I'm just going to copy over the little get value off the end there. And actually what I'll do is copy that one where I was using that before. Jumping around a bit here, put that there, but actually I don't want the new variable called that. I want it to be called gen CopyScript as an interim variable here. That's the I underscore in the naming I've got going here. Alright, well actually that looks right. I can uncomment that. That would be fine. That's now a lot like I could save now because that's something that should work fine. That's the correct name of the variable. The .get's the same as the other one. Note here that I really could be someone who's completely forgotten that the way you read a variable here is the .get bracket because all I'm doing is I'm copying it from the other bit of code. It's not really going to go wrong. And the reality is you do tend to do this a lot. You tend to go, well, I can't remember. How do you get the value out of that variable? Oh, okay, in this other bit of code, I was doing .get bracket. Therefore, that's obviously how I do it. You know, you don't have to be a master of all things. You just have to trust what you've done before to some extent. In this case, all the code is mine, so I am trusting myself. All right, we have now picked up the value of the checkbox. We've got it into a temporary variable here. We now need to pass it through where we were passing the other ones. The last one of these checkbox values that is being passed here is this one, iSummaryDiffs. We can see that just above is being picked up from another check variable. So I'm just going to do comma, add that one to the list. Now that's fine, but actually right now we've got code that will crash because we've added a parameter to the calling here, and the thing that's being called, when it gets that, it's going to go, what? I don't have that many parameters. Bang, crash. So this is all kind of a way of coding where you force yourself to go through and make the change all the way down the path, or in this case down deeper into the program. It's not the only way to go about doing these things, but this is a way that I kind of like, and it works very well in compiled languages in particular because I could hit compile and it actually calls an error either here or in the other function, the other place where the function is defined. So that's kind of what we're going to do now. So the one I've added is the iGen CopyScript. I did that by pasting, so that's now in the clipboard. That's kind of fine. But we need to go to the function that we're calling here, which is this thing, T02 parse throwcess. If you watched the previous video, you'll kind of know I mentioned in passing that we're not directly calling the function, we're using a threading call for this. So in fact the call here for the function is to call an imported function called thread, and it's being passed the name of the function to run, and then in the args we actually have the list of all of the parameters to be passed through to it. That's a sleight of hand about threading. However, if we do search for the function called T02 parse throwcess, and if we do Control F to search, and if we go previous to search backwards up the code, there I've just set a comment saying that's what I was about to do. Here's the definition of the function. So this is what we were throwing that new additional parameter to. So now I can do comma and add that new parameter here. Now my convention here of mine, no pep thing about this for me, this is just something I made up as I've been learning Python. You saw where I called it, I had I underscore as the name of the parameter because it was a little interim value. Here it's the parameter being passed in, so I'm going to call it p underscore gen CopyScript. Alright, well having done that, I can do a save. I'm not doing any particular testing of compiling or running this at the moment, we're just working our way through some editing. But this should run now. Like if I go and press run, everything should be fine because that parameter has been passed in, it's where it was called, it's been added. Nothing will happen different because this is the only reference here in the process. So we do need to now work out what to do with this. There's not a lot in this function, it only goes for this amount of code here. And actually if we look at what's happening with the other parameters, p summary diff is there, you can see the highlight matching down here where it gets passed to the next level. So really this little level here is just a little bit of housekeeping and then calling a deeper function. But that does mean that we can now add the new parameter we're passing in into this call. Note this time it's not at the end because this level call is then also passing a logging parameter. So the place to put the new parameter is going to be in the middle here. So actually what I'm going to do is get in the clipboard the comma, space, then the name of the parameter, come down, and I'm going to put that right there before that comma. And that way it puts it into place. Do a save of that. Now again, we've added a parameter into the place where we're calling a function, but you haven't gone to that function and told it about that parameter yet. So at the moment we now have again code that would fail, that would crash at runtime in the case of Python. So we need to work out where to go to add that parameter call. So the function being called here is actually this one, congruentry paths command. Okay, that's not obvious where that is, so let's put that in the highlight. Search for that. I'll search upwards. Oh, okay, it's being imported from another module. In fact, it's being imported from the congruentry module. So that's now where we need to go to add that to the list of parameters that that function knows it's expecting. So congruentry is over here. Now we've still got the search in the mode by which it's looking for that function call. So if I do Control Home to jump to the top, and if I do Control G here in Genie as the editor, it'll repeat the search, and actually it'll repeat it going downwards, which is why I did Control Home to go to the top. So Control G, there we go, it jumps straight to where that is. So here we can see the parameters that it thinks it's being passed in. If you're eagle-eyed, you'll notice that the last two of those were report diffs and then summary diffs. So in the place where the new parameter goes is before the log parameter passed in, like that. So I just pasted in that copy thing that I still had in the clipboard. So again, I can actually now do save. This now would run again. Nothing will happen with that parameter because that's the only place it's being mentioned is that, hey, you'll get this, and it's not doing anything with it. But actually the code would be fine again. So this tends to be what you will often do. And in a compile program, you could now hit compile and go, oh yes, that's fine, I've got everything matching again. Now just in conventions, for reasons I won't go into it, the parameters here aren't just p underscore the name, they've actually got this little CPC in front of it, which actually is an abbreviation for congruentry paths command. So there is a reason why I was doing that at the time I wrote this code, and I'm not going to mess with that, I'm just going to make this bit here conform as well. And we'll make that CPC P gen CopyScript. And I'll get that in the clipboard again. That may or may not be what I want to do later. Now again, I can use a similar trick about from the highlighting to see where a parameter is being passed through. Here's the parameter before it, the summary diffs one, and we can see it highlighted further down. So probably the naive thing we'll expect to do is probably to pass this additional one in the same way. There's a bit more going on here, and in fact if we do match on report diffs, put the cursor there, let the mutual highlighting here of the editor show me where it gets used. Oops, I'll come back up here. So there it is in the parameter list. You can see down here in line 553 that it's being used in the call to a lower function, but it's also being used afterwards to decide what to do about some outputs. So it is getting used in a couple of places. Right, well, for the moment, let's pass that further down. Now, at the moment, in terms of saying let's pass this further down, I'm kind of relying a bit on remembering what we did in the last video, where we worked out where we wanted to do things. So at the moment, we'll have to take that as read. Now, there you go. I've been talking, so I've forgotten what I've got in the clipboard, and that happens a lot. So I'm going to re-put that bit up there, this new parameter, into the clipboard. Come down here. Remember, I did it with the comma space, so I can paste in at the comma point here. And we're now passing that further down. We'll probably, I think with this one, if my memory is correct, we'll actually want to pass that down, in which case it'll cause the processing routine to do extra stuff that it wasn't already doing, but also after it's called it, we'll probably want to use that value, and we'll probably want to have an if this new flag, and therefore go and do something, which will probably be to create the copy script, I think, at this point of the program. That's my memory of what I was doing. So we'll take it as read for the moment. But we now therefore want to go and look at this function call here. So here is the name of the function, and just to recap here, this function is returning quite a lot of variables. So the line really starts there. All of that is a list of variables that will be returned. Here's the equals call here to the name of the function there, and then all the parameters being passed down into the function there. So a little bit to read there. And really that is getting a bit messy. I mean, it's messy enough for me to be thinking, oh, should I be doing something that looks a bit simpler? Well, yes, probably. But at the moment, no. These things have just been, as we are here, we're adding a new parameter. You know, it's just that thing, oh, let's just add one more thing, add one more thing. There is a point when you will go, no, this is getting ridiculous and too hard to read. It's entirely possible we've already passed that point here, but that's, that's another matter really. So congruency check trees is now the place where we also need to tell it that you're going to get a new parameter because we've added an extra one. So that's wait in the search, go back up. Actually, I'm going to do something I keep forgetting to do otherwise, which is add to the search def space, and that way we'll definitely jump to where the function gets defined. Boom, straight there. So we do need to add the new parameter here. So here we have the last of those parameters in sequence, the summary diffs one. There's the comma point. Pass that in. Now once again you can see I've got a naming convention going on here in the parameters, that they're not just all p underscore then the name of the thing that I want. They've actually got this other prefix in here. In this case the prefix is CCT, standing for congruency check trees. So again I will match that to avoid confusing myself lower down in here. And actually I'll put that in the clipboard now because we've now got a new parameter. Now once again, you can do a save at this point because this again should be code that will run. You'll find it won't go and crash because it's got a mismatch of parameters being passed in and parameters expected by the functions. Now here we have to come back to what we did discover when we did the last video, and this is the function that has 3 layers of functions within it. So congruency check trees is the one that gets passed the 2 paths to work on, path A, path B, a whole bunch of controls about how it should do things. It goes and sets up a variety of lists that it will build up throughout the run. Then we have a middle level function that basically will get passed once each with a true or false for whether it should do it with a light touch or a heavy touch. And so that then also sets up some lists and some variables to deal with. And then we get the recursive call, which actually will do analyze a layer of folder, and if there are folders within, it'll then call itself. And that's the 3rd level down. To be really pedantic, there's actually a small function inside that again, which is just a display one for debugging purposes. We'll ignore that. But it does mean it's a bit hard to follow this. As we scroll down, we've got 3 layers of call going on. At the moment, we've just added a parameter to the outer level here, the concurrency check trees, and we've added this one, CCT pgen copy script. So let's come to that level of code here. So we're in the first indent level. So certainly this is what's going on in this. If we now ignore the fact that we then define a function and then within that define another function, I'm just letting my cursor scroll down at that first indent point, because that way I'll get to the resumption of code. And yes, there is quite a lot going on in here. Here we go. So this is really the first level down, and there's the return, but somewhere in here we do get the call to trees pass. In fact, there it is there. They're the two calls to trees pass the next level down. You'll note there's no parameters being passed here. It's just being passed false the first time and true the second time. Oh, okay, so that tells us that our new parameter, how does it get transmitted into the lower levels? It's not by being passed as a parameter. Okay, it's by some other method. So I'm just going to page back up again to where we were looking at things. So here's the main body of code again. Now, if I was being pedantic, I should probably go and add a line of comment here to say what this new parameter is. We'll do that later. Now, one of the ways to try and work out what's going on with the parameters is, because I'm already passing other parameters, is that's just to look at what's happening to those. So if I put the highlight into that summary diffs one there, I can see there's my comment being highlighted. A bit further down, in the next level down, it's being declared non-local, which in Python terms is the way of saying to this next level in, there's going to be a variable from the outer level that you're going to treat as one that you will not recreate when we get mentions to it. That's very much a Python thing. So what I'm going to do is replicate that. Added the new one there. Alright, well that new passed in variable is now available to the trees pass level. So that's kind of good. And again, I'll save that change. I'm going to put the highlight back on that piece summary diffs one, just to see if that happens again for the next level further down, because I've got a funny feeling it does. Yes, there it is there. So here we are. We have that trees pass in the middle. Congruency check subtrees is the lower level recursive function, and it's also being told that references will be made to the outer parameter variable. So actually we will need to do the same thing as we just did then. So, oops, that's the wrong thing in the clipboard then. Let's just come back up. Just want to pinch that non-local CCT PG and copy script. Come back down, there I was there. Paste that in. Now do a save. Alright, so the places where this needs to be known to use about whether we are going to generate a copy script, is now available to the innermost function, congruency check subtrees. Now that raises the question of exactly where and when we should use that variable, and that's going to be a matter of looking into the logic of what's going on as we are roaming around comparing things. And so the answer at the moment, as we're doing this code run, is, what am I going to do there? I have in my head, I know what I'm going to do, but that's now for the deal of maybe writing some new code about changing how we are building up the lists. So from memory, amongst the things going on here, is just to let you know that I do have an idea of what we're going to do. The routine as it runs here will go and find differences, and when it finds things that are missing in one side or the other, it will add them to these lists, these CCT missing left folds lists. They start off here as empty lists, and if we search for this going further down, actually we'll do the left files one. So if I search for this going down, we should find the spots where we go adding things to that list, because they're in one side and not the other. And so this one here, for example, is if we found that they're in the left side only of the comparison of the two folders, then if we were asked to report the differences, then in fact we will append the thing we just found to the list. For generating a copy script, we're going to have to do something a bit more complicated there. So that'll be the next coding session will be to work out, okay, what are we going to do? I mean, I think I have to find a way of adding pairs of things instead of single things to here, and I'll have to decide whether to make a separate list or make the list always of pairs, but when there's no second half to the pair, that it's only got one thing in it. So I'm going to have to change something about the way these lists are built. Either the list will build different things, or there'll be two lists. So that's a decision to be made, and that's something for another time. The purpose of this video was to show you that process of going from having identified where in the code I needed to do something, having built the bits of GUI interface. Oh, now, that reminds me, I guess, the thing that we hadn't done, we haven't re-enabled that control. We also haven't done anything in here that can let us see that that control value is being changed, and I probably would ordinarily do that and add a print function somewhere in here just to say that that boolean is showing up as different. But actually, just to finish what we were doing here, and actually so that we're then ready to test things in this code, we'll go back to folder tree here. Now I do need to find where that disabled was. Actually, I'm going to cheat here, and I think I can search for disabled. What about the dot? Let's just search for it like that. There's one that's disabled there, because I don't think I disabled many controls throughout the code. Oh no, maybe I did quite a few. Okay. Stringent turned off there. Gen copy script. Alright. It wasn't such a great way to guess that. So that's the step there, that's actually turning it to be disabled. I'm just going to comment that for the moment, because by default it will be enabled. So we now should have a program that actually will run. We're back in the folder tree module, so I can actually run from here. We've just enabled that control. So yes, now it's there, set to on by default, which is interesting. Don't know if that's a good idea. And now we can turn it on or off. And we could do run process. We'd have to add some paths in here. And that state of being true or false or not will actually be now available down inside the program. We'll probably use that, for example, to decide whether we should do something different to what we're currently doing or not. Alright, well that ends this walkthrough. I hope you found that useful. Remember, this is not really about this is the great way to do things. I really wanted to just have a demonstration of this is what it's like looking over the shoulder of someone who's working on a program that's not just a trivial exercise. It's something that actually does work. It's something that's it's reasonable size. It's not like it's a huge program this altogether, but it's, you know, there's quite a bit there now, really. And really it's just ordinary. This is the key thing. A lot of programming is not being a genius. A lot of the programming is just housekeeping, which is kind of what we just did there. That's kind of like a housekeeping bit of code to make something available from one part of the program to another. It's not scary. It's, you know, borderline boring, but that's how programming really is a lot of the time. And when you've been at it for years, you know, you just take it for granted that that's what you do.